Mariela, welcome back to the show. I am so excited to welcome you back for this incredible series that I've been working on, Jefas y Mamás, because throughout my journey as a very new mom, I've realized that we need to rebrand this entire endeavor because social media will have you just thinking that your life is over after motherhood. And I know in my own journey, as well as in speaking to incredible women like yourself, that's total bullshit, but we need to peel back the layers so that people actually know what it's like to be a badass mama and a badass business owner. And we're going to be talking to you about all of that. For folks that don't know, Mariela was on the show previously and she's dropped a lot of gems. So I'm going to link her previous episodes in the episode show notes. Welcome back to Yo Quiero Dinero.
Thank you for having me. I have so much to say on this, and I'm really happy that you bring the sorts of conversations that you do to your brand and to your audience. But like this one, I think in particular, because it's one that I think a lot of us can feel very like unseen in. So thank you for having me to talk about that.
Absolutely. All right. So let's start off at the beginning. What was your perception of motherhood before you became a mom?
A lot of my perception of motherhood was shaped by probably two things. One was being the eldest, watching my own mom. I didn't realize at the time, but like I almost felt like she resented all the work. And like, granted, I know it's a lot of work. She had 3 kids, but my parents are together, all that stuff. But I felt like she was just tired. She was exhausted. And I felt like it was my responsibility to step up, help her, and all that, which I did. So I think that's one thing that I felt like it's sacrifice. You don't have friends. Like they didn't go out. My parents didn't go on date nights. So that was one thing. And then I think the other was then my first husband. We were together for 13 years. He was also the oldest. His mom was still having kids at the time. And we were taking care of them because that family was, there's just a big family, right? They needed help. And so I felt like it's hard. Like I can't have kids. What if everybody needs me? So I think my thing was it's overwhelming. It's a lot of work and you're going to lose yourself in it. And you just become parents after that because that's what I saw. I saw parents that were very devoted parents, but in their way, very much like lost their identity. And so I think that the reason that I even waited as long as I did was because I was like, I need to live a whole ass life first. Then it came to what I actually did when I became a mom. But I think it was because of that I was like, I don't want to go into motherhood feeling like my life, it's over now.
I can totally relate. I think my lived experience with witnessing motherhood in my own family was the exact same. I'm also the oldest. And I saw just a lot of resentment. I saw a lot of depletion, of sacrifice, of putting yourself last. And so for me, I was like, that shit looks ghetto. Don't want any part of that. Right. And so I think we've oftentimes been programmed to believe that like motherhood requires ultimate sacrifice. Like you can never think about yourself before anybody else.
Yeah. And I think like even one thing that I didn't have a word for at the time was identity, where it's like your identity is, let's say, like I witnessed your identity is wife, your identity is mom. But you being able to describe yourself outside of that, like, was hard because, and it depends for, my mom, she became a mom really young of like, well, who are you outside of this? And actually having that be part of your life, like having friends or like a couple still going out and like going to do stuff together. I didn't witness that. So I think even that makes it easier to say, I'm going to sacrifice because you're like, but I actually don't know what I would do if I wasn't sacrificing because I don't know like who I am outside of this.
Absolutely. The identity of mom and mother can just become this all-encompassing thing. And I've been witnessing as women get older in my family and their kids get older and they move out and they are no longer needed, it's like an existential crisis. You see them kind of going through this almost depression because it's like, what's my fucking purpose? And I think a lot of the times we've witnessed that when women completely wrap their identities around being a mom and you give up your hobbies, you give up your passions, you give up your friendships, you give up everything that makes you a whole human, there can be this moment where you're just like, well, what is my purpose now when it's not the daily grind of motherhood?
Yeah. And your kids will feel it too, of kind of like, well, what? And then you'll start to see it, I think, because even I feel it now that I'm back in San Francisco, where it's sort of like, well, if I'm not here, what are they going to do? Or like, what's my mom gonna do? And just feeling that guilt almost for like moving on or feeling like you're leaving them behind. And I think about that with my daughter, where I'm like, I still have to watch myself to just make sure that, like, yes, I love her. I love being a mom and all of this, but like one day she's going to grow up and, want to be with her friends more and all the things. So I feel like that's the tricky thing to navigate because kids will pick up on stuff without you realizing they pick up on a lot of things, including whether you're happy.
Absolutely. Okay, y'all. Like a lot of our childhood trauma comes from witnessing the emotions that unregulated adults were not able to manage properly. So we don't want to keep perpetuating those cycles of like projecting all this shit onto our kids because we didn't do the healing that we needed to do.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So at what age did you finally become a mom? And was it an intentional decision or was it something that happened without you planning?
No, so it was an intentional decision. I was married and I was 35. And so we started to try at 34. I got married again right before I turned 34. We started trying and I got pregnant a couple times and had some miscarriages. So like by the time that I got pregnant with my daughter, it was intentional. And I felt, granted, there was a lot that happened after because I went through a divorce unexpectedly, literally, like right before I found out I was pregnant. But at the time, it felt like, okay, I've ticked off all the boxes. Like, we're married. We're financially stable as much as we can be. I am a marketing director at this company. I feel like stable enough. We had a 2-bedroom that we on purpose picked because I was like, okay, this can be the nursery. So I really, in my mind, was like, I'm finally ready. But it took me this many years to finally get to this place where I literally had a whole financial spreadsheet of like, what is this going to look like? It was so intentional. Granted, life happened after, but for me, it was something I always, always, always wanted to be a mom. I don't think that I thought it was going to take me as long as it did to ever feel ready, which I now laugh at feeling ready. But financially, I'm glad that I waited until when I did.
Yeah. So you mentioned being financially stable. So what did that mean for you and why was that important for you?
For me, financially stable was like having like a high earning salary, more so I'd say than savings, because like I probably didn't have the savings. I didn't have the savings that I wanted to have. I moved internationally. Like I didn't work for a year and a half. I was solo traveling. So I think I like tapped that, but I felt like, okay, I'm going to be a high earner. Like I'm a high earner now. And I know that no matter what happens, I always thought like, what if I get laid off or what if I lose my job? I felt like I'm always going to make money because of the experience that I have, the job title that I have, all that. So that I think is part of it. And then I think a little bit it was like, am I ready to be surprised? Like, I don't want to be living paycheck to paycheck, granted, but my threshold's pretty high, like meaning I could have a pretty big savings and I still feel like I don't have enough. So that was still in place. But I do think that for me, a lot of my security came from my career and me feeling like I personally could make the money more so than like my husband, because I made more money than he did. But so funny looking back, I always felt like I need to personally make sure I am okay just in case. The just in case wound up happening, which I'm grateful that I was able to take care of myself, but that's what it meant for me.
Yeah. Was finances a stressor point in your childhood that made you want to do something different than what you saw growing
Yeah,
up?
it was all the time. Like I just remember seeing it, hearing and experiencing it, that like life is expensive, life is hard. You better do something that's going to make a lot of money and that your life will just be exponentially easier if you have money. Save it. That was another thing, was like money is hard to earn. So like you need to save it all and like you can't enjoy it. You need to save it. And that's a lot of what drove my career choices was, what's the starting salary if I get this? Like literally that's how I chose my major, was highest starting salaries out of college. And I picked based on what I liked and what was going to pay me. It was always like, I'm not going to be broke. Like I remember thinking that from when I was a kid. I was like, I don't want to have these conversations.
That's the first gen mindset if I've ever heard it. Like
I don't want to be
literally
broke.
that's it. I don't want to be broke. I'm going to do whatever I can. And then a lot of us find ourselves again in this existential crisis where we're just like, whose fucking life am I living? I don't even like this shit. I don't want to do this. And I think, I've heard that from so many folks who are entrepreneurs where it's just like you woke up one day and realized like, I can't do this anymore. And I'm not sure what the next thing is going to be, but it's not going to be this.
That was exactly my story, where I was just like, well, this is going to be here. And also they're asking me to do shady shit for money. And so I'm like, how much shady shit do I want to do for money? or do I want to go do something else? But it's just like when the motivator is no longer making enough money, you open your brain up to ask yourself different questions.
Absolutely. Okay, so you find yourself in a situation where you are getting a divorce right as you're finding out that you're pregnant. Can you take us back to those moments and just like what was going through your head initially? Like, what was the plan?
So this was where even me, who spreadsheeted out having a child, like even me, I always think about this. Like I have people that know me joke about how I have a spreadsheet for everything for my different scenarios where I was like, I'm not going to be caught off guard. I was caught off guard. It didn't expect it. And so I think at the time I had enough money to pay the rent by myself for a while without him when he moved out. I had enough money to move myself and my shit back from London. I was living in London with my ex-husband. And it's a lot of money to like move your stuff. I had a cat that needed papers. Like your cat needs papers to move to the UK. He needed papers to move back. And that's one thing that rocked my financial security because I thought, okay, well, now I have to quit my job because I'm going back to America and like no one's going to hire me pregnant. Like by the time I was going to like move back, I had projects I wanted to wrap up. This is like something that people don't realize is like pregnancy really makes you so financially vulnerable because as much as your employer, let's say if you were brand new at a job or you're trying to change jobs, that's what I felt. I was like, I can't look for a job. I'm obviously pregnant. And then also there's maternity leave isn't going to pay me nearly anything in for 6 weeks. And I was like a high earner. It's like, what am I going to do? So that knocked out my financial security. That was the time of my life that I actually was like, I could go and try to figure it out and struggle, or I can actually take advantage of something I'm very blessed to have, which was like parents who were like, you can live here and just recoup your finances and raise your baby and we will help you. That's the reason I was able to recover financially, rebuild my savings, and become an entrepreneur, honestly, because I didn't move out until I started my business.
Wow. Okay. That is quite an intense journey for you to literally have to go and make a transatlantic move back to the States because this life that you had imagined was not going to pan out in that way. In those moments, because we've all had those moments of just like the plan is fucked and we need to regroup and do something else. What is it that kept you motivated?
At that point, it was like, I don't ever want to be surprised in a way that I can't handle again. Because I took a lot of risks at that time. I took a lot of risks to quit my job, to travel, rely on my savings. And then really, I know this is just this stuff I'm still dealing with in therapy, but a lot of it was like, oh, I let myself be vulnerable and dependent on someone else's income where I couldn't pay the rent on my own. I needed him. And granted, I paid it for a while, but like very quickly I saw like I signed up for a life that I was meant to live with another person. And so I think from that point on, granted, yes, like we want to be able to like trust our partners and all the things. And I think in my mind, I was like, how can I build up financial security and income and savings and a investment account and all of the things so that I know that at least the standard of life and the quality of life that I want to live and give to my daughter, I can still meet it. And then a partner can add to that because I had had it rocked so tremendously in my life. Like I had never like not had money. I'd never been in that situation before that I was like, I don't ever want to be here again. So that's really what it was like, I want to be financially safe no matter what happens. And that's been my motivator really like ever since. And that's been hard, but that's been my motivator.
I mean, that hypervigilance that so many of us have, it's definitely a trauma response, right? To just what we might have experienced growing up or even just in life. I'm definitely the same exact way where I don't know that I will ever be able to switch that off 100%, no matter like healthy and trusting and safe the relationship feels. I just always, there's this little thing in the back of my head that's like, this shit could go left. And I think that's not an unreasonable perspective to have, right? Because people change, circumstances change. Like
Yeah.
you can plan for the best, but it's not always going to pan out that way. And so I think it's never a good idea for us, especially as women, to just get so comfortable that shit could pop off and then you don't have a plan.
Yeah. And I think that we don't realize sometimes like how much vulnerability there is around, especially like I think about my mom's generation and before, and many even in our generation too, where when you exit the workforce, let's say to raise children, if your partner can do that, that it becomes harder. Like you do have to put a lot of trust in this because you are financially vulnerable in the sense that like if you're not in the workforce, then like it gets a little bit harder to like re-enter. And we lose money when we get pregnant and then we can't work. And they say that there's like a tax almost, they call it like a pregnancy tax or a child tax, that like a woman's income goes down for every child that she has, but then a man's income goes up. And so it's like just knowing that disparity is like just make decisions accordingly to just make sure that you've got something, you know.
Yeah. That's the case too with divorce. One of the things I talk about in my book is that there's like a divorce penalty where women more often than not end up in financial hardship after divorce, whereas with men, it's not necessarily the same situation. So just that ability to overcome these circumstances, it all comes down to your access to money. And that's why we cannot talk about motherhood without talking about how different the experience is when you have money versus when you don't.
A lot of the stress, a lot of the like feeling like you hate your life and like the emotional dysregulation and a lot of that really comes back down to like, I'm so tired of being poor or broke, or I have to cook, I have to clean, I got to do all these things because like I can't hire help and I have to do it all. That's a lot of what I witnessed. And so that's also been a motivator of like, I don't want her to just see me only working and providing and not doing anything else and not have joy and not have time for myself, like away from her as well. And having her have secure relationships with like other people.
Right. One of the things that you mentioned too that was a motivator for you is realizing that like you weren't going to be able to find work while being pregnant. And it's funny enough that I polled my audience to find out more about their own layoff stories. I've shared mine multiple times. And there were so many stories of women who were laid off while pregnant or while on maternity leave. And I'm just like, I thought there was protections against this shit, but there's a lot of ways that these companies can circumvent the rules and regulations and like justify laying you off for other reasons. But at the end of the
Yeah.
day, a lot of that shit is bullshit.
And if they have a way around it, they'll take it. And I think that if you've been in the workforce long enough, especially now, I'm like, there's just layoffs happening left and right. Ultimately, they're going to protect their profit. And if there's a workaround, they will take it. And I knew enough from being laid off many times in my career that I was like, if there's a way for them to do it, they're going to do it. So I didn't realize you had so many stories, though, of people
Yeah.
being like, yeah.
It's alarming, and this is why it's so important to also just like diversify your income, guys, because at the end of the day, like you just don't know when the rug's going to be pulled out from under you. And so you find yourself back at home with your parents, brand new mom. That's not an easy mental shift to make. Like, what were those initial days, weeks, months like? Like, did you grapple with feelings of like failure?
Oh, yeah. I was also like furious, I think at the time at like my ex being like, you let me feel something I never wanted to feel. I never wanted to be dependent. And now I am. And like, I couldn't just go and make money. And I also didn't want to because like I wanted to be with my baby. And so I think like at the time there was just a lot of grief. Like, I don't know that I realized, I look back and I'm like, this was definitely survival mode because like, by all intents and purposes, I probably should have been like wildly depressed and all of this. Like they assigned me like a social worker and like a psychotherapist because I was like high risk given everything that I had gone through. But I just remember like I loved being a mom. I was so happy. I think I was just really mad at him. But I felt very vulnerable in the sense that like I couldn't do what I would normally do to be like, fuck it, I'm out. Like if I need to leave, I'm going to pick up my shit and me and my baby are going to go. For a while, I was like, you actually can't do that. So it was really hard because it's like my fight or flight that wants to know she can leave couldn't do it. And I even had to rehome my cat, the cat this bougie ass cat that I moved to the UK with him and all of this stuff. Like I had to rehome him because he started peeing on stuff. And that was like the ultimate thing of like, you could move out to keep your cat, but you're going to struggle a lot more because you haven't rebuilt your savings enough. It was things like that I was like, it just felt like so much loss at the time. And so I was like, when I leave this job, thankfully I was able to keep my job. I was really good at my job. So my boss
So
was
you
like,
were able to do it remotely while you moved back in with your family?
for several years, yes, I
Oh,
was able
wow,
to do
okay.
that, and that changed everything because that was, like, the one constant that I was able to keep and, just take meetings, still lead my team, all of that, which is how I was able to, like, rebuild because it would have been hard for me to go back to work and pay literally, you guys, $2,100 a month for daycare in San Francisco, like, $2,100 a month, that's what I was paying. So it's like you had to pick. It's like I couldn't go part-time because what am I going to go do part-time and then like pay that amount of money? So it was just a lot of grief, I think, at the time. And realizing that when I leave this job, I'm going to like my standard for like what I wanted to earn and like how hard I was going to hustle at the time. That's what I was thinking was like really high because I was like, six figures is nothing here. Six figures is like you're barely scraping by in San Francisco. So that was a lot. It was like, I build quietly and I was like, okay, I'm just going to do my job. I'm going to do what I need to do. I don't know what I'm going to do if I'm going to go into big tech. I interviewed for a bunch of companies that were all paying like 200K and above. So it was a lot of like, what's my next move going to be? Is it going to be me going into tech into a 200K salary or am I going to work for myself?
Okay. So take us behind the scenes of the initial building of the business. What did that look like? When were you doing this? Because you're obviously working a full-time job, you're being a mom, you're like trying to rebuild your life. Take us to those initial days. Like, what was a day in your life?
Once I decided that I was going to work for myself and I didn't know like what it was going to be, this was like after a series of interviews and realizing like the type of work that I can do is no longer like it's going to be like me being a company representative and like protecting them and their name and protecting them and their assets. And like there was no way this was going to be light work. Like I knew exactly what it was going to look like because this is what I did before. I was like, I'm either going to go and make these people a lot of money with all of my time. I already knew from the interviews, or I was like, okay, well, what can I do? So I thought at the time, okay, what kind of quality of life do you want? That was a different question to ask because I was like 200K job and $4,000 a month for rent and $2,000 for daycare. I was already like, what quality of life do you want? So I really started with that. I was like, I want more time with my baby. I don't want to be working around the clock and I want to do work that matters. So I kind of like anchored into that and was like, tech isn't going to give me that. Probably San Francisco isn't going to give me that. So I didn't really know. So I started with that. And the beginning of me building the business was really me building a brand where I didn't know what it was going to be. I didn't have an offer. I didn't know what it was going to be, but I took my IG that I had had since 2011. I started sharing what I knew around, just telling my story. I started sharing like marketing advice. I started sharing like self development, whatever I had, and just started trying to help people through my brand. I did a photo shoot. I didn't know what the photo shoot was for, but I was like, I'm going to treat myself like a brand. And so I spent all of 2019 turning my Instagram into a brand that people trusted, people knew me. And then when I did hire a coach and have an offer, I actually was able to sell it because I didn't just show up thinking about what I was going to sell. I built a brand first. And I felt like because I didn't have an offer, in a way, I let myself be very present in the brand. It wasn't like, here's how I can solve your problem. It was very much like, here's me, here's my story, here's what I'm about, here's what I believe, here's different things I can help you with. That's a lot of what that was me working, logging out at around 12 p.m., putting my baby down for a nap, switching back over, showing up, doing lives, doing workshops, doing stories, collaborating with people, and just kind of getting my name out there as much as I could.
And at what point did you decide to go full in on the business? Like, how long were you building before you?
Once I started making money, not very long. It was kind of, I just had a higher risk tolerance because I was still living at home, like in all fairness. So it was 2 months after I landed my first paid client. It's just that I landed, granted, this is 2020, and coaching industry is very different. I was like hitting 6 to 10K months. And so by the time I landed literally my third client, and I was working part time. So I was like, my threshold was a little lower. By the time I hit my third client, I was like, if I can hit 3 clients in 2 months, I can land 10 clients. So I'm going to email HR and put in my notice. And so I did. And I said, I have to do it that day or I'm not going to do it. And then they laid everybody off 2 days later because it was the pandemic. And they told me, you need to lay off your team. And I was like, actually, I quit 2 days ago. Can that save my team? And my boss was like, no, sorry to hear that. Also, you still need to lay off your team. So I would have not had a job.
Well, as they say, everything happens for a reason, right?
Right. And also, don't ever get too comfortable at any job because I was indispensable, so I thought, but this was bigger than everybody. Like I was so indispensable that they were like, we'd rather not hire someone in the UK. We'd rather keep you. I worked there for 5 years, but this was bigger. So you just never know. And I was very glad that I had spent a year building my brand because I wasn't just building off of me having 3 clients. I was building off of like the trust that I had built over the last year and a half.
Girl, your story needs to be a book. I'm just gonna put that out there that you need to manifest a book deal, okay? Like it needs to
Yeah.
happen.
Coming from you, I'm like, that's instructions. I need to listen.
No, it really is.
Denise
It
said
really is.
so.
Especially someone like you who literally makes a living telling people how important their stories are. Yours needs to be on paper for
Yeah.
generations of women to be inspired by.
I've been told that for you to write a book about your story is like harder than like writing it to like instructional or like educational, but you have to have a really good story that people learn a lot like from it. So thank you.
For sure. Okay, so let's keep going. So you find yourself in this transition period where now you are going full time in the business. One of the things that brings people a lot of anxiety is becoming your own support system from like a benefits perspective. So when you were thinking about like, how am I going to get health insurance? What am I going to do for retirement? What are we going to do? What did that look like for you?
So I don't know if this is just a California thing, but I'm like, you've got to make a lot of money before you really have to pay out of pocket a lot for your health insurance. Like I did a whole calculator again to look at, well, how much do I need to profit? Because it's not what you make. It's what your business actually profits that you report as income, and your threshold, like you have to make a lot of money. Because even when I was making like 100K a year, they still subsidized a good portion of my health insurance and all of my daughters. This might be different by state, but in California, your child threshold, like your income, like they'll still get their health insurance paid for. So like I was paying like $100 a month for my healthcare and nothing for my daughters. And then I just paid out of pocket for dental insurance for both of us because I wanted her to have access to like a really good like pediatric dentist. I still do that now. But my health insurance isn't, it took me to make like 350,000 a year. And then the profit from that for me to get to a point where I had to pay 390 a month for my insurance. At that point, that's not going to take you out. So I think sometimes people are afraid to take the leap, but they're not actually looking at like, are you going to pay thousands of dollars or whatever a month? Or could it possibly be subsidized? Go and run some scenarios on like how much would you need to actually be profiting in your business for that to become something that's like a debilitating cost.
I think that's great advice. A lot of the times when we psych ourselves out of these scenarios, it's because you haven't actually run the numbers. You don't actually know like what the situations are going to look like. And a great example for me is when I was thinking about what does my postpartum support system look like? I knew I wanted a night nurse. Like that's something that I'm like, I need to fucking sleep. Like I'm just not the type of human that can function out here on like,
Yeah.
Red Bull and 2-hour naps. Like we're not doing that. That's not how you run a multiple six-figure business, okay? So I was like, I don't know how much this shit costs, but I need to know because it's something that I want to budget for. And when I started doing my research and finding like you could find people between like $20, $30 an hour, I'm just like, why are we making this shit like seem like it's some big fucking luxurious thing? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, it's probably a lot of the shame people think that they're going to get tacked on with because you have a night nurse because you need to sleep. So
Right.
you're not feeling crazy.
God forbid you want to be a functional adult that can still show up to their business, show up to work, be a decent human to the people that you love. It's just one of these things where we need to take the stigma out of wanting this level of support, of being able to afford this level of support. Like, we're not out here busting our asses to still be trying to do it all. That's not the point.
No. And not everybody feels guilt. When you said night nurse, I didn't know night nurse existed until one of my friends who supports like tech billionaires here in the Bay Area told me, she's like, the minute they came home from the hospital, night nurse. Like they have help like around the clock, but she works for billionaires. But I'm like, these people don't feel a type of way about getting help. But yet we're here being like, but I can't. It's going to make me like a bad, even if you can afford, like if you can afford the $20 to $30 an hour so that you can sleep, even if it's a few nights a week.
Yeah. And it's funny because when I would talk to friends and family about it, first of all, most people didn't even know that that shit exists. And then they're just like, but like, you're okay with like somebody being in your house? And like, I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? There's a camera. Like, you can watch the whole interact. If I want to be a weirdo and stay up the whole 8 hours and watch what the fuck is going on, like, I can do that. But also, y'all need to get out of your heads with this bullshit. This is nonsense, you
Yeah,
know?
like
It's like,
in my house, would you say?
I would much rather her be in my house than me having to drop her off somewhere. I don't know what the fuck's going on in that place. You know what I mean?
No, that's absolutely.
It's wild how people just get all bent out of shape about just normal shit. We have been so programmed to think like we need to do this all. And I think a lot of that is because we're a society that has been fragmented. We're not the type of society that like lives in the village where we grew up. I look back at my mom's experience and it's like the titi was on the corner and the godmother was here. And like there was so many people to pawn your kid off to for a couple hours. That is not the life we live, especially as remote entrepreneurs, as people who maybe you leave where you come from because it's just not aligned with where you want to live. There's so many different reasons to like be away from your immediate support system. And in that case, like what other choice do you have other than to be able to buy your support system so you don't
Yeah.
lose your whole ass mind?
You still need a village. Like, that's one thing that I realized as a single parent. There were a few years where we lived in Portland, Oregon, and I didn't have the village, meaning like I literally couldn't be out after dark because I picked up my daughter from school and then we were home. And then she went to bed at 7 o'clock. That I was never unhappier, I was more depressed than when I had lower cost of living, but I didn't have anybody to be with my child. So like no breaks than I did then. And now I'm back in San Francisco living a hella more expensive ass life, but I personally feel happier because I'm able to actually be somebody other than coach and mom. So I wanted to share that too, that it was like, I realized I need to have a village. However, that is especially in your kids like early years. My daughter's 8 now. It's feeling a little different, but yeah, we still need the village.
Let's talk about that support system. What does that look like for you, both from a personal perspective and also from a business perspective?
So personally, I now live like 12 minutes away from my parents. My dad picks up my daughter from school. He does her homework with her. They feed her. Literally, I will go and pick her up and they're always like, we have such and such food. So I literally go eat dinner at their house so that when I come home, I'm not cooking and washing dishes or door dashing. Like I actually just get to spend time with her. For me, that's like just like life changing because she gets to have her abuelitos and I get to just pick up my daughter and enjoy her and not have to like deal with other stuff. At least during the week, I don't need to like cook. But then my support system is also just like my friends, therapy, things like that. And then from a business perspective, I have more than one coach and I can bring my business questions and my mindset drama and all the things. And all of that is important because I think about on a regular basis, people don't believe me. I'm just like, I feel like a needy ass bitch. When I think about like go to my text threads, go to where me asking for coaching, like I am so supported. And I say that because it's going to feel that way when you're doing it right. And it's okay. Like I literally couldn't do this. People are like, how do you do it? And I'm like, I damn sure like don't do it by myself. I have a lot of people. Granted, I pour into a lot of personal relationships as well, but I get to be a needy bitch because like I also am like very generous and like I'm a generous coach. I'm a generous friend. Like I am that person. So I don't feel a type of way.
I love it. We need to destigmatize asking for help because so many of us have this internalized belief that if you ask for help, that somehow makes you a failure, it somehow makes you less than. And no, I think honestly, that vulnerability that requires for you to ask for support is one of the bravest things that you can do.
It is. I know we're not conditioned to do that as like daughters of immigrants. And I know that that's hard. And so it is going to feel like you're keeping score in your own mind in terms of like, can I ask this? Can I do this? And all of that. But we probably overgive way more than we realize in our lives. It's okay to like ask for it sometimes. And for many people, it's like their pleasure to help us. Either we pay people to help us or you need a village, someone to like give you a break, call you out on your shit in a loving way, like hold space for you, all of that. I absolutely like couldn't do it.
I think it's also so important for us, especially mom entrepreneurs, to like have other women who are mothers and entrepreneurs in your circle. Like the way that women have showed up for me, like moms have showed up for me in this journey. I mean, just like, hey, here's a random Uber Eats card so you and your hubby can like go and get some food. Or this is like the most useful thing I had when I was pregnant. Like just the outpouring of love and support from women who like get what you're going through is so fucking real and it's so needed.
And you know what? It's beautiful. And it makes me think when you've gone through something hard, it's actually a gift and a joy to be able to like try to make it easier for another person. Like people think that they're out here like taking, and it's like their pleasure sometimes to like help you, you know?
That's true. Do you have people that work for you in your business?
I do.
Okay, so what does that support look like?
So I have an online business manager, which is kind of a blend between like a VA and operations work. I also have a podcast editor. And then we have really strong systems. So I don't need a whole podcast manager. Just have a podcast editor and we have strong systems. And yeah, and that's it. That's how I run my business. I restructured a few months ago, did everything by myself for a few months. It was very humbling, but I also realized like I didn't get a lot of things done. Like the quality of my thoughts, like my ideas, like all went down because I was busy uploading calls and not getting my podcast off the door. Right. So like I realized my business actually needs a team. My life needs a team or I'm spent.
It's true. I think one of the main things I want to do with this entire series is just like make people realize that we're not doing this alone. Because I think there's this perception that like we're just out here killing it. And it's just like, yeah, we're killing it, but it's not the work of a solo person.
No, it's not. I mean, I also have like a house cleaner that comes every month. It took me years to do that because I felt bad because I felt like, oh, they all remind me of my tias and stuff. And like, I'm a horrible person. So I'm like, I got business support. I have support in my life. And just even that helps me feel sane. It helps me feel like a breath of fresh air. Like, oh, I'm not just coming into a mess that I have to clean up all the time. And then there's some things that feel exponentially harder for each person that I feel like if I can outsource 20% of that and then that gives me all of my energy back, I'm going to do it because I'm going to show up so much better to the other things that I actually like doing and that I'm good at.
I love that. What would you say is the driving force behind what you do now? Like, how does your role as a mother play into the legacy that you're building as a business owner?
I just know that I built my business and my brand, I think, for people to not have to, let's say, like the sacrifices that I've had to make. So, specifically, I want people to, my clients, to be able to be who they are, not have to perform, not have to leave their identity at the door, not have to like fear for you have to be palatable for somebody to give you a paycheck. I want them to be able to make money by being who they are because the more money that I made, the more I couldn't be a mom. I felt like my mom identity was compromised. My Latina identity, I had to water down. And at a certain point, I'm like, fuck this. I don't want to do that. Like, we are brilliant. We're talented. We have so many gifts. So that's one thing. And I also want each person to feel like I have a brand. No matter what I do, I can change my mind. I can decide that I want to launch a physical product, a digital product, a consulting offer. When you become a brand, at this point, every year, it's like real estate. Your brand is like a little casita that you have and it goes up in value as long as you feed it. And I want everybody to have that to fall back on no matter what. If you want to become a speaker, you want to launch a book. And it's like not spoken about that often that I'm just like, you can change your mind. You can have an offer, you can have whatever, you can have a job, you can lose it. But if you have a brand, nobody can take that from you, especially if it's based on you. That's what I wanted because I had to hide and mask and all the things and all the years in corporate. And now I'm like, no more.
We both have that in common because I realized after the fact that I've intentionally built multiple businesses now that like center around my identity as Latina. And I think a lot of that was this like subconscious rejection of all of the whitewashing and the code switching that we have to do to show up in these high powered, high earning spaces. And so if you are feeling like an imposter at your job, it's probably because you're being asked to be this version of yourself that you don't even fucking recognize so often that it becomes almost like you're detached from what makes you actually you.
That's a really good point about that's the reason that you feel like an imposter is because you're being told to act and that there's only some parts of you that are welcome and other ones are not. So yeah, you're an imposter at being somebody that you don't want to actually be.
Yep, absolutely. I'm curious, what lessons from motherhood have you applied to entrepreneurship?
Um, the very first thing that came to mind is like, I realized that generally I will take as much time as I'm given to work. So if you give me hell hours, like I'll default to doing that. And that it wasn't until I became a mom that I realized like it's not actually helpful for me to work as many hours as I used to. So if you give me her naps and after she goes to bed and whatever she tolerates while she's on the iPad for a couple of hours, I will get that shit done. So I now realize and I'm like, and it's gonna happen because like you have this standard, and now I'm like, my capacity, I call it like B minus capacity. And it's not that I'm doing a bad job. It's just like I gotta just build a business that operates at me at B minus capacity. Cause when she's fine and everything's whatever and she hasn't gotten sick, great. But when I don't have that, then I don't feel like I'm losing my mind. So I think I realized like motherhood makes you realize like, number one, we are hell efficient and get shit done. We don't actually need as much time as we think that we do. And I don't want to build a business that requires all of that because like, what's the point? And I think also like I don't want my business to be my whole identity. Before my job was my identity, I used to introduce myself as a marketing manager, and now I'm just like I want to like go do stuff with her. I love going to the park with her. I love going to Dolores and getting a little picnic blanket out. I want to go do mommy daughter dates and go to a little tea house. I want to do those things, and I want my business to be like third. And it's like, I want to do it well, but I want to show up for my clients in a way, like the way that my daughter feels like, I hope that I love my life and I love being with her and I'm not resentful of her. I want my clients to feel the same way. I don't want to be like, you need to like fulfill my sense of purpose. So that's the thing is I want my business to be third in like the healthiest way possible.
I fucking love that. And I love that you really are clear on how it can fit into your life. You know, like it doesn't have to be your whole life to be this business owner. And for me, I've realized that as I go further into motherhood, like this external validation that so many of us seek, and the accolades and the awards and the all that shit just really doesn't matter because you have like this greater purpose now. You know, it's like you're building for other reasons that don't have to do with other people like giving you your flowers per se.
No, but also like I'm just like my kid thinks I'm like the best person on earth and she makes me drawings every single day to say how much she loves me and I'm just like I'm already like the so loved. Like I don't need my business to be that. I want to do a good job, but that's different. I want to do the best job that I can at my business, but I don't need it to make me feel like I'm worthy and like a good person. So it's just a different way of being and like also there's so many times where I'm like I miss her. Like I can't wait to just pick her up from school and just like be with her. And so like I just feel like I'd rather show up full to everything, like excited to be on a coaching call and like pour into my people and then excited to like pick her up after school and like let's go get boba, you know what I mean? And I wanted her to actually like experience me and like have memories with me and then have me be the person going on field trips like while she wants me to. To me that's like success to be able to do those things.
Let's talk about that, right? Because one of the things that we spoke about before hopping on the call was how money can have a major impact on how much you actually enjoy motherhood. So tell me about how money has impacted your journey as a mom and what are some of the things that like you love doing as a mom that money allows you to do?
Yeah. So I will say that I've had to catch myself a lot of times, like, especially when, well, before I started the business and I had to like save my money, whatever, she was too little to like pick up on anything. But I've noticed that I'm not as present. Like, even there's times where the business is like taking a dip, right? Last year was one of those years where I was like, I'm just going to pull back right now. Like, I'm exhausted. I need to focus on other things. But I noticed that my brain wasn't present with her as much because I was always like, okay, I have to do this. Oh, I could be doing this. And she'll call it out. So I think that, and this is like a very privileged problem to have because I know that I have like the brand, but for sure it's made me feel like when I felt less secure, I'm also like less present. And I also am less quick to throw money as like the solution to being like, let's go get food. Let's go stay in a hotel this weekend. Like I have a bougie ass kid who will ask me like, could we go stay at Hotel Nico? And I want to go to like the pool where, you know what I mean? Maybe I'm not as quick to just be like, let's just go traveling. But it does help me in the sense of like, there have been times I have solved problems with money by like ordering food to feed myself because instead of me cooking and like, I'll make her something simple. It's just easier. Like I'm able to solve problems. And I think now it's made me realize like, I get to choose between working harder to make more money, to scale or do whatever versus like I'm going to not work on Friday because somebody canceled on the field trip and hell yeah, I want to go to like the field trip to chaperone. And I don't think we always need to choose necessarily, but sometimes it does mean that. It means like if I wanted to work twice as many hours, I probably could make more, but I like this balance that I have right now. And I like who I'm showing up as in motherhood and in my life. And that's, I think, a thing to pay attention to because I think we think that if you don't like the way that you're showing up, you need to make more money so that you like how you're showing up. Sometimes that answer is yes, when you literally don't have enough to make it. But when it's beyond that, then it starts to become like a slippery slope of it's never enough.
I love that perspective of just like us defining what enough looks like. And I think there's this pressure for a lot of us to keep scaling and keep growing and keep outdoing the next year and blah, 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 blah. But I think at some point, it's just like, what is the point? Am I living the quality of life? Am I showing up as a parent? Am I showing up as a human in a way where I am fully resourced what I need so that I'm not like just continuously chasing this moving target? And I think a lot of that has to do with you not necessarily allowing yourself to be influenced by like everything that you see going on around you and like that comparison game
Yeah.
influencing you.
And I think that the folks that I absolutely have compared myself to, I think about like, yeah, when I was 28, I would have probably run the business that way too. And before kids. And so I say this for myself, not that you have to run your business differently because you're a mom, but I always say, like, what if I just am running my business like a single mom? And me running it like a single mom means 25 to 30 hours a week. It means being with her on the weekends, like actually being with her. She notices if I'm not, and just a different way of running things, and almost like planning for how would I run my business if she was homesick with a fever. That's kind of how I run my business on a regular basis, because it just means like I have extra time when things are going well, but inevitably it's not always. And I think I was trying for probably the first several years of my business to run it like I was before kids. And I'm like, I actually don't want to do that. That's why I came here. And it was like I'm comparing myself to people who have nothing to do with me, to be honest. So much of the things that I do now in the way that I run it is like, what is going to give me the best return without me having to like do the most and put all of the content out there and be live and show my face all the time. Cause I'm just like, I don't have time for that. And I don't want to run my business that way either. So what if it's okay to run your business like a parent, like a single mom? You get to decide what that looks like.
It is absolutely okay. And not is it okay, but it is just so refreshing to experience watching you, seeing you taking your daughter on trips and really showing especially single moms that they can show up in this brilliant way as entrepreneurs. They can make a shitload of money, live a life that feels full. And I would love to close out this conversation with your best advice for single moms who are listening who want to start their own business.
One I would say is like surround yourself with examples of people who are doing things that you think you can't do. Like watch who you're comparing yourself to. So I would say like if you think that there's something you want to do and you don't think is possible, go find people that are proving you wrong. Surround yourself with that. Look at that and not use it against yourself. Don't weaponize it and use it against yourself, but just to start to sit with what if I could? With every reason that you tell yourself, but it's going to be harder for me. Okay, it might just look different for you. But what if you could do it differently? And just entertain the thought and don't stop planning. Just plan to do it your way, plan to do it differently. It's okay if it takes longer. It's okay if it takes whatever hours that you've got in the day. That's probably my best advice is like you have to almost build a little Delulu bubble around yourself when you're trying to build something that you don't think that you can do, or people before you didn't, or you don't see a lot of examples. Go build your little Delulu bubble of like examples that you can do it, and just entertain the thought of like, you think that you can't, but what if you could? What would it look like? And then just go from there.
We're not doing vision boards anymore, y'all. We're doing Delulu bubbles. Okay. That's the thing.
Go to a Delulu bubble.
You need to trademark that. That's so good. Mariela, this conversation has been incredible. I know that folks are going to want to find out so much more about you, how they can work with you. So tell us where we can find you on the internet and how you work with clients.
You can find me on my website, marieladelaMora.com, but I hang out mostly on IG at mariela.delamora. I also have a podcast called Cycle Breakers and Moneymakers. I work with clients one-on-one, and I also have a mastermind called Reclamation, where you get to make more money by being who you are.
I fucking love it. Thank you for giving us permission to show up as badass mujeres, badass moms, and badass entrepreneurs, even if you find yourself in situations where maybe single parenthood was not your goal or getting laid off from that job was not your goal. Like, we can still be out here flourishing, y'all. And there's so many different flavors of what this experience of entrepreneurship looks like, of what motherhood looks like. And it really is up to you to create that dream experience and dream life for yourself.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Jean.